Lisa sat in the corner of the couch, her swollen feet propped up on a cushion, absent-mindedly scrolling through her phone while Mark showered upstairs. The sound of the water running echoed faintly in the background. She glanced at the coffee table, noticing Mark's phone lying there, the screen lighting up briefly with a notification. Lisa wasn't the type to snoop she believed in trust, especially after years of marriage. But something made her pause. Perhaps it was the late nights Mark had been working recently, or the way he'd started guarding his phone, always placing it face down. Curiosity tugged at her. At first, she tried to brush it off, convincing herself that she was overthinking hormones, exhaustion, the stress of impending motherhood. But the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. She reached for the phone, telling herself it was just a quick look, nothing more. The screen had locked, but Mark's passcode hadn't changed. She entered it, her heart racing as though she were committing a crime. Opening his messages, Lisa immediately regretted her decision. Her breath caught in her throat as she scrolled through a thread with Emily, her best friend. The texts started off innocently enough, mentions of casual dinners and shared jokes. But as Lisa read further, her stomach turned. The messages grew flirtatious, intimate, and then explicit. "Can't stop thinking about last night. You looked amazing. We need to find a way to sneak away again soon. I hate not being able to touch you." When will Lisa figure it out? She's so busy with the baby, she probably doesn't even notice. Tears blurred Lisa's vision. She scrolled back through the thread, desperately trying to understand how long this had been going on. The dates stretched back months longer than she had expected. As far as she could tell, the affair had started shortly after she announced her pregnancy. The realization hit her like a punch to the stomach while she had been preparing for the arrival of their child. Mark had been betraying her in the most personal way possible. The sound of the shower turning off jolted Lisa back to reality. She quickly locked the phone and placed it back on the table, her hands trembling. Panic set in. What was she supposed to do now? Confront him immediately? Scream, cry, demand answers? She felt paralyzed by the weight of the betrayal. Mark came downstairs a few minutes later, his hair damp, towel slung over his shoulder. He smiled at her, oblivious to the storm brewing in her chest. "You okay, babe? You look pale," he said, grabbing a bottle of water from the kitchen. Lisa stared at him, her heart pounding. For a brief moment, she considered pretending nothing had happened. She thought about their unborn child, the life they were supposed to be building together. But the image of those texts, Emily's words, Mark's responses flashed in her mind, and the anger began to bubble up. "I saw your phone," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark froze. His casual demeanor disappeared as he turned to face her. "What?" "Your messages with Emily. I saw them." For a moment, Mark didn't say anything. His face went pale, and his mouth opened as if to respond, but no words came out. Then, like a reflex, he began to deny it. "Lisa, you're misunderstanding. Those messages aren't what you think. Emily and I are just friends. You're overreacting." "Overreacting?" Lisa snapped, standing up despite the weight of her pregnancy. "Don't insult me, Mark. I read everything. The late-night meetings, the sneaking around you've been cheating on me with my best friend." Mark's expression shifted from denial to defensiveness. "You've been so distant lately," he said, his voice rising. "All you care about is the baby. Do you even notice me anymore? I'm just supposed to sit around and wait while you're completely obsessed with being a mom?" Lisa stared at him in disbelief. "Are you seriously blaming me for this? For your affair? I'm pregnant with your child, Mark. I've been doing everything to prepare for this baby while you're out having an affair with Emily." Mark ran his hands through his hair, pacing the room. "I didn't plan for this to happen, okay? It just happened. I needed an escape, Lisa. You've been impossible to talk to lately, and Emily was there. She understood me in a way you don't anymore." Lisa's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "Don't you dare try to make this my fault. You betrayed me, Mark. You betrayed us. Do you even understand what you've done?" The weight of her words hung in the air, and for the first time, Mark looked genuinely remorseful. He sat down on the edge of the couch, his head in his hands. "I didn't want to hurt you," he muttered. Lisa laughed bitterly, tears streaming down her face. Well, congratulations. You succeeded anyway. For the next hour, the argument spiraled into a mix of anger, blame, and silence. Mark tried to apologize, but his words felt hollow. Lisa alternated between fury and heartbreak, her mind racing with questions she didn't know if she wanted answers to. How long had this been going on? How could Emily, someone she had trusted implicitly, do this to her? Eventually, Mark left the house, claiming he needed space to think. Lisa was glad to see him go. She needed space to process the betrayal, to figure out what to do next. As the door closed behind him, Lisa sank back onto the couch, clutching her stomach protectively. She felt a kick from the baby, a small reminder of the life growing inside her. It was a strange comfort, a reminder that no matter how broken she felt, she wasn't alone. In that moment, Lisa made a silent vow. She didn't know exactly what her next steps would be, but she knew one thing for certain: she wouldn't let Mark's betrayal define her or her child's future. She would find a way to move forward, with or without him. The house was eerily quiet when Mark left that evening, the sound of the door closing behind him reverberating in Lisa's ears. She sat motionless for a few minutes, staring at nothing in particular, her mind racing with a million fragmented thoughts. Her heart still ached, but the initial shock had given way to a simmering resolve. She didn't know yet what she was going to do, but she knew one thing: she couldn't let this betrayal break her. Lisa got up slowly, her movements heavy from both the weight of her pregnancy and the emotional toll of the evening. She made her way to the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water, her hands trembling slightly as she drank. As the cool liquid soothed her parched throat, she began to think more clearly. Mark's betrayal wasn't just about the affair, it was about his complete disregard for her and their unborn child. The realization filled her with a cold determination. If he thought she was going to sit quietly and let him destroy their family, he was sorely mistaken. Lisa knew she needed help. She wasn't going to act impulsively, this required careful planning. Her first step was to gather information. She retrieved her laptop from the living room and settled at the kitchen table, opening a new browser window. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before she typed, "What to do when your spouse cheats during pregnancy." The search results were overwhelming. Articles, blog posts, forums, thousands of stories from women who had been in similar situations. Lisa read for hours, absorbing their advice and experiences. Some women had chosen to forgive and rebuild their marriages, while others had walked away and never looked back. The common thread was clear: regardless of the outcome, the most important thing was to protect yourself and your child. By midnight, Lisa had a rough plan. She would consult a lawyer first thing in the morning to understand her legal options. She would also gather evidence of Mark's affair, as several articles had advised. If she decided to leave him, she needed to ensure that she and her baby would be financially secure. Despite her exhaustion, Lisa couldn't sleep that night. She lay awake in bed, her mind replaying the events of the evening over and over. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the texts between Mark and Emily. She heard his voice, his excuses, his blame. But she also heard her own voice, steady and unwavering, vowing to take control of the situation. The next morning, Lisa called a family law attorney whose name she had found online the night before. The receptionist was kind and understanding, scheduling an appointment for Lisa that afternoon. "Don't worry," the woman said gently. "You're taking the right steps. We'll help you figure this out." Lisa spent the hours leading up to the meeting gathering as much evidence as she could. She scrolled through Mark's phone again while he was at work, screenshotting his messages with Emily and saving them to her email. She found receipts for expensive dinners and gifts she had never received, which she suspected were for Emily. She even took note of the dates and times when Mark had come home late, cross-referencing them with the messages to create a timeline of the affair. By the time Lisa arrived at the attorney's office, she felt more prepared, though still anxious. The lawyer, a sharp and compassionate woman named Rachel, greeted her warmly and invited her to sit. "Tell me everything," Rachel said, her tone calm and professional. Lisa recounted the events of the previous evening, her voice shaking slightly as she described the texts and Mark's reaction. Rachel listened intently, taking notes and asking occasional questions. When Lisa finished, Rachel leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "First of all, I'm so sorry you're going through this," Rachel said. It's an incredibly difficult situation, but I want you to know that you're not alone. We're going to make sure you and your baby are protected." Lisa nodded, feeling a flicker of relief for the first time since the ordeal began. "What are my options?" she asked. Rachel explained the legal implications of Mark's infidelity. Because they were married, Lisa was entitled to a portion of their shared assets, including their home and savings. She also had a strong case for primary custody of the baby, given Mark's betrayal and lack of involvement in the pregnancy. "The evidence you've gathered is crucial," Rachel said. "It strengthens your position if this goes to court. But I'll be honest, divorce can be a long and emotionally draining process. It's important to think carefully about what you want and what's best for you and your child." Lisa nodded again, her resolve hardening. "I want what's fair," she said, "and I want to make sure my child has the best possible future." Rachel smiled. "That's a good place to start." Over the next few weeks, Lisa continued to prepare quietly. She opened a separate bank account and began transferring small amounts of money from their joint account, enough to cover her expenses without drawing Mark's attention. She also started researching child custody laws and parenting plans, determined to be fully informed before making her next move. Meanwhile, Mark seemed oblivious to Lisa's plans. He acted as though their argument had never happened, alternating between attempts at charm and sullen silence. Lisa played along, careful not to reveal her intentions. She needed time to finalize her preparations, and she didn't want to tip him off. The hardest part was pretending everything was normal around Emily. The betrayal still burned, but Lisa didn't want to confront her yet. Instead, she avoided her as much as possible, declining invitations and keeping conversations brief. She knew that when the time came, Emily would have to answer for her actions. As the weeks went by, Lisa felt herself growing stronger. She still had moments of doubt and sadness, but they were overshadowed by a sense of purpose. She was no longer a victim of Mark's betrayal, she was a woman taking control of her life. Late one night, as she sat in bed reviewing her notes, Lisa felt the baby kick. She placed her hand on her belly, a smile breaking through the fatigue and worry. "We're going to be okay," she whispered. "I promise." It was a promise she intended to keep, no matter what it took. Lisa had spent weeks meticulously preparing for the moment when she would finally take control of her life. The betrayal had left her wounded, but she refused to let that pain paralyze her. Instead, she had channeled her heartbreak into action. Now, the moment had come to execute her plan. It started with an email to Rachel, her lawyer, outlining her readiness to file for divorce. Lisa had been careful to document everything: Mark's affair, his neglect during her pregnancy, and the financial evidence that demonstrated his repeated spending on Emily. She wanted to ensure that when the papers were served, Mark would have no leverage to fight back. Lisa chose a Friday afternoon, knowing Mark would likely head straight to Emily's place after work. She didn't want to confront him in the house they still shared. It wasn't fear that drove her decision, but a desire to protect her own peace. She didn't owe him the satisfaction of witnessing her anger. That morning, Lisa met with Rachel to finalize the paperwork. As they went over the details, Rachel reassured her. "You've done everything right, Lisa. You're in a strong position. This isn't just about ending your marriage, it's about setting yourself up for a stable future for you and your baby." Lisa nodded, grateful for Rachel's guidance. The divorce papers included requests for full custody of the baby, with visitation rights for Mark. They also demanded that Lisa keep the house and receive spousal support, given Mark's higher income. It wasn't about revenge, Lisa reminded herself. It was about fairness and ensuring her child's security. After leaving the lawyer's office, Lisa made one more stop. She had decided to send an anonymous package to Emily's husband, Mike. It contained copies of the evidence she had gathered, screenshots of texts, receipts for hotel stays, and even a photo she had found on Emily's social media, a blurry image of Mark's car parked outside Emily's apartment late at night. Lisa wasn't proud of this move, but she felt it was necessary. Mike deserved to know the truth, just as she had. By the time she got home, Lisa felt both exhilarated and exhausted. She knew she couldn't relax yet, there was still so much to do. She double-checked her preparations, her separate bank account, the financial records she had stored safely, and the nursery she had worked so hard to set up. The sight of the baby's crib, tiny clothes folded neatly inside, filled her with a bittersweet sense of resolve. This was her priority now. That evening, as expected, Mark didn't come home. Lisa's phone buzzed with a single message from him working late. "Don't wait up." She didn't respond. Instead, she forwarded his text to Rachel, knowing it would serve as additional proof of his habitual absence. The next morning, Lisa received a text from Rachel: "The papers have been served." Lisa pictured Mark's reaction. He would probably be confused at first, then angry. She imagined him storming into Emily's apartment, venting about her audacity. But Lisa didn't care anymore. She had stopped worrying about his feelings the moment she discovered the affair. As the day went on, Lisa waited for the inevitable confrontation. It came late in the evening. Mark burst through the front door, his face red with anger. He held the divorce papers in one hand, waving them like a weapon. "What the hell is this, Lisa?" he demanded. "You're divorcing me? Are you serious right now?" Lisa remained calm, seated on the couch with her hands resting on her pregnant belly. "Yes, Mark. I'm serious. Did you think I would just sit here and let you humiliate me? Let you destroy our family without consequences?" Mark scoffed, pacing the room. "You didn't even talk to me about this. You blindsided me." "I didn't need to talk to you," Lisa said, her voice steady. "You made your choice when you decided to cheat on me. You don't get to play the victim now." Mark threw the papers onto the coffee table, his anger boiling over. "This is insane, Lisa. You're being dramatic. Do you really think you can take everything from me? The house? Full custody of the baby? You can't do this." Lisa stood, meeting his gaze with unwavering determination. "I can and I will. I have proof of everything, Mark. Your affair, your financial irresponsibility, your neglect. You don't get to play the good guy anymore." For a moment, Mark seemed at a loss for words. Then his expression shifted, his anger giving way to something else: fear. He realized that Lisa wasn't bluffing. She had prepared for this moment, and he was completely unprepared to fight back. "This isn't fair," he muttered, sinking into a chair. "Fair?" Lisa repeated, her voice tinged with disbelief. "You want to talk about fair? Was it fair when you betrayed me while I was carrying your child? Was it fair when you spent our money on her while I was here, trying to build a life for our family?" Mark didn't respond. He stared at the floor, his shoulders slumping in defeat. After a long silence, he finally spoke. "What do you want from me, Lisa?" "I want you to sign the papers," she said. "I want you to take responsibility for your actions. And I want you to leave, so I can focus on raising our child without your lies and selfishness hanging over me." Mark looked up at her, his face a mixture of anger and regret. But he didn't argue. He picked up the divorce papers and left the house without another word. Lisa watched him go, her heart heavy but resolute. She knew this was just the beginning. The divorce process would be long and difficult, and co-parenting with Mark would bring its own challenges. But for the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of control over her life. The next few days brought more fallout. Lisa received a tearful phone call from Emily, begging for forgiveness. "I never meant to hurt you," Emily sobbed. "It just happened. Please, Lisa, don't shut me out." Lisa's response was cold and clear. "You made your choice, Emily. You don't get to ask for my forgiveness now. We're done." Emily tried to argue, but Lisa hung up, blocking her number. She felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Cutting Emily out of her life was painful, but it was necessary. Meanwhile, Lisa heard through mutual friends that Mike had also confronted Emily, and their marriage was on the brink of collapse. Lisa felt a twinge of guilt but reminded herself that Emily's actions had consequences. As the weeks turned into months, Lisa focused on preparing for the arrival of her baby. She worked with Rachel to finalize the divorce, attended prenatal appointments, and leaned on her family and close friends for support. By the time her son was born, Lisa felt stronger than ever. Holding him in her arms for the first time, she knew she had made the right choice. Mark's betrayal had been devastating, but it had also taught her the importance of self-respect and resilience. She whispered softly to her son, "We're going to be okay. I promise." And for the first time in a long time, she truly believed it. Months had passed since Lisa had signed the divorce papers and officially ended her marriage to Mark. The house felt different now, quieter but more peaceful. She had reclaimed her space, both physically and emotionally, and every corner of the home felt like it was hers again. The nursery was the brightest room in the house, filled with soft blues and yellows, tiny stuffed animals, and shelves stacked with books. Her son Noah was now 3 months old, and every day with him felt like a gift. Lisa had learned a lot about herself in the months following the divorce. She had underestimated her own strength, her ability to adapt, and her capacity for love, despite the hurt she had endured. Noah was her anchor, a constant reminder of her purpose and resilience. But even with the joy he brought her, there were still challenges, lingering doubts, and moments of loneliness. Mark had visitation rights, though Lisa had insisted on supervised visits at first. He wasn't a bad father when he showed up. He seemed to love Noah in his own way, but his attention often wavered, and he struggled to keep his promises. Lisa's lawyer had advised her to document everything, and she did, diligently recording every missed visit or late arrival. One Saturday morning, Mark was scheduled to come by at 10 a.m. to spend time with Noah. By noon, Lisa sat on the couch, bouncing Noah gently on her knee, the untouched diaper bag still by the door. It wasn't the first time Mark had let them down, but each time it happened, Lisa felt a fresh wave of frustration. She had hoped, perhaps naively, that becoming a father would change him. When Mark finally called hours later, his voice was full of excuses. "I got caught up with work," he said. "I'll swing by tomorrow instead." "No, Mark," Lisa said firmly. "This isn't how it works. If you can't prioritize Noah, don't expect me to rearrange my life for you." There was a pause, and then Mark sighed. "You're making this harder than it needs to be, Lisa." "No, Mark," she replied, her voice steady. "You're the one making it hard. Noah deserves better than this. If you want to be in his life, show up. If not, stop pretending you care." After hanging up, Lisa felt a mix of relief and sadness. She had done her part, she had given Mark the chance to step up. But she couldn't force him to be the father Noah deserved. That evening, Lisa sat in the nursery, watching Noah sleep in his crib. The soft hum of a lullaby played in the background, and she thought about all the moments Mark had already missed: Noah's first smile, his first coo, the way he looked up at her with wide, trusting eyes. Mark's absence no longer felt like her failure. It was his. Lisa's focus shifted to herself and Noah. She began to build a routine that revolved around their little family of 2. She joined a local moms group, where she met other women who had faced similar struggles. They became her support system, sharing advice, laughter, and the occasional tear over coffee and playdates. One of the moms, a woman named Jessica, quickly became a close friend. Jessica was also a single mother, having left an emotionally abusive marriage shortly after her daughter was born. Their shared experiences created an unspoken bond, and Lisa found herself opening up in ways she hadn't before. One afternoon, as they sat in the park watching their children play, Jessica turned to Lisa. "You know," she said, "you're one of the strongest people I've ever met. You've been through so much, but you're still standing." Lisa smiled, the compliment warming her. "I don't always feel strong," she admitted. "That's because you're in it," Jessica replied. "But, from the outside, it's obvious. You've built this whole new life for you and Noah, and it's beautiful." Lisa thought about Jessica's words that night as she lay in bed. She had been so focused on surviving, on getting through each day, that she hadn't stopped to appreciate how far she had come. The tears, the sleepless nights, the self-doubt, it had all led her here, to this place of quiet strength and determination. The turning point came a few weeks later when Lisa received a letter from Mark's lawyer. Mark was voluntarily relinquishing his visitation rights. He claimed it was for the best, that his demanding job made it impossible for him to be a consistent presence in Noah's life. Lisa felt a pang of sadness for Noah, who would grow up without his father actively involved. But she also felt relief. She wouldn't have to deal with the constant disappointments, the empty promises. She folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, a symbolic act of closing that chapter of her life. Mark's absence wouldn't define Noah's childhood. Lisa would make sure of that. Over time, Lisa found herself rediscovering parts of her identity that had been buried under the weight of her marriage and its collapse. She started painting again, a hobby she had loved in college but abandoned as life grew more complicated. Her evenings became a time for creativity and reflection, and her small apartment began to fill with vibrant canvases that mirrored her journey. One day, while displaying her work at a local art fair, Lisa met Daniel. He was browsing the booths, holding his niece's hand as she chattered excitedly about a painting she liked. Daniel was kind and unassuming, and their conversation felt easy and natural. Over the next few months, they developed a friendship that slowly grew into something more. Daniel was patient, understanding of Lisa's guardedness, and genuinely adored Noah. For the first time in years, Lisa felt what it was like to be cared for without conditions or expectations. As Lisa watched Noah take his first wobbly steps one sunny afternoon, she realized how far they had come. The pain of Mark's betrayal had once seemed insurmountable, but it had led her to a place of strength and clarity. She had built a life filled with love, not the romanticized, flawed love she had once clung to, but the deep, unconditional love she had for herself, her son, and the people who supported her. Sitting on the floor of the living room, with Noah giggling as he toddled toward her, Lisa felt a profound sense of gratitude. She had survived the worst, and in doing so, she had created something beautiful, a new beginning. The story wasn't about Mark's betrayal anymore. It was about Lisa's resilience, her ability to rise from the ashes and build a life that was full of hope, joy, and love. And that, she realized, was the best revenge of all.